Good morning, everyone. Where else but the Twin Ports can you get 275 people out at 7 o'clock in the morning on Halloween Day? So fantastic crowd. We love to have you here. Thank you for coming. I'm not going to speak very long today, which, no applause? I'm not going to speak very long today, but I just want to remind everyone that in 6 days we have an election. And if that's not on your calendar, to make sure you get out and vote. How many have gone out and voted already? Hey, I love that. So please get out and vote, and let's do our duty and make sure that we're paying attention to our elected officials. I do want to give a round of applause for if you're running for office or if you're in office, whether it be city government, county government, state, or national, please stand up. And if we have anybody here, we just want to recognize you today. And we appreciate your service very much. On behalf of National Bank of Commerce, I want to introduce Bruce Thompson, MC today. Thank you, Bruce.
Good morning. How about that? Fright night is today. But what is really exciting is the student presentations today, kind of documenting our 15-county northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin region is really not very scary. It's very exciting. And while we have momentum, we're just getting started. So it's really cool. So don't be scared. Look forward to the future in this wonderful region that we live in. Our program today, once again, is presented by National Bank of Commerce as the presenting sponsor. Our silver sponsor is the Superior Douglas County Development Association. We have bronze sponsors, Bar Engineering, Better City Superior, LHB, Architects and Engineers, and RBC Wealth Management. Please give them a round of applause. Another sponsor who is also akin to our presentation today is our keynote speaker, comes from Minnesota Public Radio, and so we also have MPR News as a bronze sponsor. Please give them a round of applause. Relative to the folks that are in the audience today that are elected leaders and or aspiring elected leaders, I'd like to call attention to them specifically. We have a couple guests that have never been to a breakfast here before that are pretty important in the state of Wisconsin. We have Jay Risch and Greg Ryman, the Secretary and Assistant Deputy Secretary of the Department of Financial Institutions for the state of Wisconsin. A regular also we have here is the Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's Northern Representative, Mary Ann Lippert. We have our two mayors of our wonderful cities, Mayor Emily Larson and Mayor Jim Payne. We have Senator Janet Bewley, represents the 25th District in northern Wisconsin. And I didn't see her, but Kelly Westland, from the office of Senator Tammy Baldwin. Is Kelly here? She was registered, didn't show? Okay, all right. That's what I have. All righty. With that, we have some very exciting presentations to begin from our three universities. And I can tell you that, again, this vision Steve Burgess had many years ago now was further complicated by the fact that when he did this once before in a prior life, it was primarily dominated by one university. And when he came to our region, he found out that, wow, this Minnesota-Wisconsin region up here has three great universities. And we all need to work together, right? So he kind of corralled them all together, gave them assignments. So we got them all to coordinate, and they're best of friends relative to describing how the 15-county region performs. And they're all learning great things, and what's wonderful is they get to present to you, great experience for them. You get to see what's coming out of the educational pipeline, which is awesome for you. So with that, I would like to introduce Hattie Eklund from the University of Minnesota Duluth to start off our presentations.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, okay, perfect. So my name is Hattie Eklund. I'm from the Bureau of Business and Economic Research through the Leibovitz School of Business and Economics at UMD. And today, how do I use this? Green arrow, beautiful. Today I'm going to be presenting on the economic trends impacting our region. That's a pointer. All right. So the economic indicator we'll be discussing today is gross regional product over labor force size. And gross regional product, of course, is just the regional version of gross domestic product. It's an important indicator because it tells us about the productivity of each labor force member in our region. It's similar to GDP per capita, however, by focusing on labor force, can account for some demographic variations. So throughout this presentation, we're going to be breaking down this indicator into its two components, gross regional product and labor force, and kind of comparing the Duluth Superior area to other peer areas like us. Traditionally, we do focus on the 15-county REIF region for these kind of presentations. However, GRP data is unavailable at the county level, so instead today we'll be focusing on metropolitan statistical areas, which is just a way to geographically group cities and counties based on high population densities. So based on the factors you can see here on the screen, the following 5 MSAs have been identified as suitable for comparison to the Duluth Superior MSA. And those would be Fargo, Green Bay, Rapid City, Rochester, and Sioux Falls. So we're also going to be looking at their measurements of these components as well and kind of seeing where the Duluth Superior MSA lines up. To begin, the first part of this indicator would be gross regional product, or the monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a region in a given time period. Generally, that's annually. And we see the Duluth Superior MSA GRP the past 10 years. We are trending upwards. We have seen about a 15% growth in GRP over the past 10 years. Of that 15%, we have seen about a 9.6, just about a 10% increase from 2015 to 2017. So we were kind of interested to see what industries were growing and what could account for this kind of growth. So here you see the GRP industry breakdown, and you can see that mining, of course, has grown about 100%, and obviously accounts for a lot of that growth in GRP over the past few years. Conversely, you do see some industries shrinking, such as educational services and construction. Those are a bit more unclear. However, construction, for example, could be the result of a major project being completed during this time period. Comparatively, you can see that the Duluth Superior MSA falls kind of in the middle of the spread as far as our peer areas. We do see a bit more volatility. However, it's important to note that out of all 381 US MSAs, the median GRP growth over a 10-year period is about 6%. And as I said earlier, we're at about 15, so we are in good standing nationally. However, some of our peer areas are seeing unprecedented growth, such as Fargo, who's grown nearly 40% in the past 10 years. So that is kind of accounting for some of that skewedness you see there. The next part of this indicator is labor force, and that is the amount of people employed or unemployed and actively searching for work. You do see a bit of volatility with the Duluth Superior MSA labor force growth over the past 10 years, predominantly due to the fact that after 2009, after the Great Recession, we do see a lot of people that did leave the labor force. However, from 2015 to 2018, we have seen about a 2% increase in our labor force, which is very good. Again, we kind of wanted to see where that growth was coming from. And looking at American Community Survey data, we did identify 5 groups where we did see that the labor force was growing, and predominantly that's driven by an older workforce, more females, and a population with a bachelor's degree or higher. Comparatively, Duluth Superior MSA has a relatively large labor force in comparison with our other peer areas identified in this presentation. However, we do have a bit flatter of growth compared to areas such as Sioux Falls, which have seen about 16% growth in their labor force over the past 10 years. Again, important to note that the median growth of labor force for U.S. MSAs is about 3% over a 10-year period. So we are a bit below that, but we have seen that recent increase, which is very good. Finally, coming full circle to that indicator that we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation, GRP per labor force member, you can see where we compare to our other peer MSAs. And although it might seem that we are on the lower side of this figure, it's largely due to the fact, like I mentioned in the previous slide, that our labor force is so large relative to our GRP. That can only be compounded by the fact that some of our peer areas have seen such unprecedented, such major growth, especially in their GRP. So while we may be under some of our peer areas in some of these components, we are generally above the national average and just lagging a bit below in labor force growth. So to conclude, we have seen about 15% growth in GRP over the past 10 years. That's double the national average, driven primarily by mining, manufacturing. And we have seen about a 1% increase in our labor force over the past 10 years, just slightly below the national average. That being said, to conclude, we have a lot in common with these peer areas we have identified today. And so from here, we can better understand what practices they're doing and how to mirror that and potentially increase our growth in the future. Thank you. Up next, we're going to hear from the UWS student, Opeyemi Omewale.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Opeyemi Omewale, and I'm a student at the University of Wisconsin-Superior, double majoring in economics and business administration with a minor in communication. This semester, 15 UWS students and I collected data and computed the consumer confidence indicators. These indicators comprise of household surveys taken across 15 regional counties, with 8 in Minnesota and 7 in Wisconsin. We conducted these surveys via phone calls and also using emails from past REIF participants. The first index is the Index of Consumer Sentiment, which is a leading indicator that helps measure the outlook of finances, businesses, and also consumption spending. The second is the Index of Current Condition, which measures how consumers feel about the current state of the economy. The third is the Index of Consumer Expectation, which is another leading indicator that shows how consumers feel about the future state of the economy. This semester, 131 randomly chosen households responded to our phone surveys. The results show that the ICS, the blue line, the ICE, the green line, and are almost unchanged since fall 2017. Only the ICC, the red line, shows a slight decline. It is clear that the overall rising trend of these three indices started in fall 2016, and it still continues. The second group is of past REIF participants, and 108 people participated in our email surveys. Similar to the random public, past REIF participants have rising index of consumer sentiment, index of current conditions, and index of consumer expectations. However, for the REIF participants, the rise in the index started later in fall 2017. The results show that both random households and past REIF participants have optimistic outlook on the personal finances, business conditions, and consumption spending, which is the ICS. They think the current condition of the regional economy is strong, which is the ICC. However, currently, random households are slightly cautious. And finally, there's a positive expectation of the future economic expansion, which is the ICE. The results of our regional survey, the favorable consumer sentiment, matched with findings of the National Consumer Confidence Indicator computed by the University of Michigan. This positive view is mostly due to low unemployment, low inflation, and strong labor markets that we're currently experiencing in the economy. Interestingly, for both groups of the REIF region, the most positive view is on the index of consumer expectation. And this is also true for the University of Michigan's national survey. From our 2018 survey, we conclude that compared to 2017, both random public and past REIF participants have strong sentiment and optimistic view about the future state of the economy. This concludes my presentation for the Consumer Confidence Indicators. And next comes Nicholas Kosman, who will be presenting on the Regional Equity Index. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Nicholas Kosman, and I'm a senior at the University of Wisconsin-Superior. I am from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I major in finance and economics. During this fall semester, myself and 6 other research assistants worked and compiled the Regional Equity Index. In an ongoing effort to bring up-to-date information to this forum, we have selected the following companies to create the Regional Equity Index. The index is compiled of 14 publicly traded companies that have a significant impact within the region. A REIF index is at 8 of 11 stock sectors, with materials consisting of the most with 4. We chose companies from a variety of industries that we feel best represent the region. Some are unique to the area, like Ali and Polymet, while others are national or global, like Charter Communications and Marriott International. As indicated in the graph, the blue line represents the REIF index, the red represents the S&P Mid-Cap 400, and the green, oil futures. An investment of $100 into the REIF index starting in February 2009 would result in a 209% increase, compared to a 145% increase in the mid-cap and 94% increase in oil returns. Our region has continued to outperform the S&P 400 mid-cap from 2009 to date. As you can see, we are more sensitive to fluctuations in commodity pricing compared to the more diversified mid-cap. This graph shows a closer look at the last 2 years. The REIF region has continued to see increased gains as oil returns rise. This shows that the REIF economic activity is highly correlated with the prices of commodities such as oil. To diversify the economy, the REIF region needs to expand into non-commodity related sectors such as information technology. Our next chart highlights the regional price volatility in comparison with the mid-cap 400. As you can see, the REIF line has higher peaks and valleys, making it more volatile. This makes sense because our economy is less diversified. Through statistical regression analysis, we find that 56% of our region's price movements align with the overall market, while 44% in the prices is unique to the region. Analyst opinions on the region are expected. The higher volatility leads to higher returns and price growth, but less safety and stability. Our region's short ratio increased to 5.77. This is more bearish than we last reported. However, on an individual basis for the 14 regional companies, the short ratio shows that investors have a positive short-term expectation for majority of the stock. 11 of the firms in the Regional Equity Index have a short interest ratio of less than 5. An indication that investors believe that stock prices will rise. We continue to expect the REIF index to slightly outperform the S&P Mid-Cap 400, bearing any unexpected shocks to the economy. We continue to expect a sensitivity to global commodity pricing to impact the region. We see a need to develop a more diversified economy that encourages expansion of technology and hospitality sectors within the REIF region. The summary statement of our research presentation shows that we expect the REIF index to slightly outperform the S&P Mid-Cap 400 index. and that investors are more bullish than bearish on the majority of the 14 stocks representing the region. This concludes my portion of the presentation. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Cole Martin from CSS to talk about business confidence indicators for the REIF region.
Good morning. Excuse me, I've been battling a cold the last few weeks, so bear with me here. Good morning, my name is Cole Martin. I'm a senior finance major from the College of St. Scholastica. I am a local from Cook, Minnesota, which makes our local economy very important to me. After graduation, I hope to remain in our REIF region to support local businesses. My partner, Nicholas Anderson, and I have worked hard at analyzing our local businesses' confidences, and I'm here to present our findings to you today. Hopefully this will give you difference makers in the crowd a chance at a better insight in our local economy. We sent on a survey to our region's chambers to relay them to local businesses. In return, we saw 87 responses. 21 of those responses were professional services, 14 were educational services, and 15 were other, which included nonprofits, insurance, and others for examples. The largest employee sample was 1 to 19 employees at 47 respondents. Our second largest was 100 plus employees at 30 respondents. Our questions were about the leading economic indicators that drive economic success. These include business confidence, changes in employment, profits, taxes, average hours worked, and selling prices. We narrowed our focus down to business outlooks of confidence, profits, and employment. In the spring of 2018, they projected an overall business outlook of 48% improvement, 39% no change, and 13% said they will worsen. Looking back now, 52% said they improved, 23% had no change, and 18% worsened. They had saw more improvement than previously projected. The next 6 months projected, 48% said they will see improvement, 36% said no change, and only 14% will worsen. We are seeing our REIF region remain confident in their overall business outlook, with many entering no change, possibly due to the cold winter coming up. The REIF region also is accurate in their forecast for the next 6 months, with an average of 4% difference in the past 3 years. Here we compare previous REIF projected actuals for business expected changes in profits. As we see an optimistic projection each 6 months, they have less than their actuals. Going from 41% projected to 31% actual, again, that could result from our harsh winters and that no one wants to leave the house, which I don't blame them. This fall's breakfast, businesses have forecasted a 32% increase, which seems more realistic in order with our past results. This is important to businesses as accurate forecast helps with future expenses scheduling, such as employment and wage rates. Employment projections are very close to their actuals, which tells us businesses have a better understanding and idea of where their employees are at. From our research, businesses are actually seeing more of an increase than actually projected. The most important factors to consider, the most important factors to increase profits is to have a successful employee force. However, our REIF region has seen a difficult time in recruiting qualified employees. 65% of our respondents said yes to this difficulty, and 35% said no. Among those 65%, 13 of 21 professional services answered yes, and 10 of the 14 educational services said yes. Reasons for this is competition for those employees, high wage rates, poor work attitudes, and other. Other included some of the same options and high healthcare rates. And as found in UMD's presentation, GRP is found to have negative growth in the professional and educational service sectors. This correlates with the difficulty in finding qualified employees. In a business interview conducted in the spring, a large employer in our region stated the following: "This region is filled with an excellent workforce. However, it is hard to find candidates with the specific skill set needed as jobs continue to evolve." 2 other large businesses reported the same issues, also including migration to this area is very low compared to Minneapolis, for example. The REIF region remains confident in overall business activity outlook, which means a strong economic presence. However, the main hindering factor in the economy is finding qualified and skilled employees for the new and creative economy. Thank you.
Let's give all of our participants another hand, please. Now, in our effort to continue to bring you more value, you'll find on your tables an overview of today's presentation that you can take with you, and it summarizes each one of the student presentations and also highlights the next upcoming REIF and some additional information about our effort here. So I hope you enjoy that. I will now be introducing our keynote, and I'll remind you that you can text questions to me when we get to the question portion of it. We'll have a question and answer period following the presentation. So it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. He is Chris Farrell. He is the senior economics contributor at Marketplace, American Public Media National's syndicated public radio business and economic programs. He is economics commentator for Minnesota Public Radio and host of its series, Conversations on the Creative Economy. He's an award-winning journalist. Chris is a columnist for PBS Next Avenue and the Star Tribune. He has written for Bloomberg Businessweek, New York Times, Kiplinger's, and other publications. The author of 4 books. His most recent is Unretirement: How Baby Boomers Are Changing the Way We Think About Work, Community, and the Good Life. Please welcome Chris Farrell.
Thanks, Matt. Well, thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here. And to emphasize, we are going to have questions at the end, and would love to have your questions, because here's the thing, I'm usually in a studio, and it's me, maybe an engineer, connected to David Brancaccio in New York, and then LA's taping it, and you're all looking at me. So, if we have at least question and answer, it's going to at least appear like a radio show. But no, I'm very honored to be here. And I have a lot of fond memories of Duluth. And I just have to tell you, when I moved to the Twin Cities, one of the places I'd lived before was San Francisco. So I get to the Twin Cities, and people go, you have to go to Duluth. It has hills. It'll remind you of San Francisco. So I get in the car right away, drive up to Duluth. It's not San Francisco. However, made many trips since then. And I have very fond memories of coming up here. I've been to the Hall of Fame ceremony at East High, and visited the sewing room at Foster River. And so, and I sampled a little bit of the bent paddle. And, but I've also been over to the University of Wisconsin-Superior and met a lot of students and professors, done some events there. And just one of the best deals I ever negotiated was going up there. We gave a talk, and then with a couple of students and professors from University of Wisconsin-Superior, and my payment was lunch at Anchor Bar. Okay. And the other thing is, I just love the port, the twin ports. I used to be a merchant seaman. That's what I did after I graduated from college, and I worked in the engine room of ships, and my first job was a wiper, and on a container ship. There's actually my second job. My first job, caught the ship, Brooklyn Piers. We go out to New York Harbor. My dad is in his office looking out the window. Maybe he had a tear in his eye, I doubt it, but a tear in his eye, and we hit another ship. So that was the shortest voyage I ever took. We just went to the shipyards in Hoboken, the repair yards. And it was fun. One of Richard Stewart, Dr. Richard Stewart, is professor at the University of Wisconsin-Superior. He used to be a merchant marine captain. And so we were sharing stories about how we both worked for this fly-by-night outfit, and we managed to survive. So, been in this region a lot, traveled throughout the region, up to Tofte, Grand Ray, Hayward, Bayfield. And so as I was preparing my remarks, I reached out to different groups, and I was talking to some elders who get together in Wisconsin, and they have their coffee. You know, what do they talk about? What are they seeing? And talking to some professors in the system. And of course, there are a number of themes that emerge from that on both sides. In northern Wisconsin in particular, the need for more infrastructure and spending on infrastructure, better broadband and wireless, that came up. Healthcare is always an issue. Elder care and caregiving, particularly in the more rural areas. And it doesn't matter whether you live in a rural area or an urban area, affordable housing has become extremely important. But what I want to do this morning is build off the presentations, these wonderful presentations that the students have made. And first, summarizing it, you have growth in your gross domestic product. It's a healthy region room for improvement. Households, they have a good sense. There's a lot of confidence that's going on in what may happen. And finally, business leaders are optimistic, but their primary issue is qualified, skilled workers. So building off that insights, I want to take a step back and look at 4 major economic forces that I think are shaping our economy, for good or for bad. That's not the issue, but they're shaping our economy, and then put our region into those 4 economic forces, which I think are to the benefit of the region, that there are opportunities for small business, for local government, for nonprofit organizations, for training organizations, as this region can benefit from the changes that are going on in our national economy and our global economy. Now, just as one caveat, physicist Niels Bohr, turns out it wasn't Samuel Goldwyn, but his physicist said never make predictions, especially about the future. But I'm not going to heed that wisdom. So the first trend I want to highlight is globalization. You know, that abstruse, abstract term that gets thrown out there that really just means the greater economic integration of nations. And there's nothing new about this global economy. And I just have to tell you this side story. It's in Ireland, Dublin, and there's a small museum there. And it has very early works from Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And it also has the Book of Kells. And the Book of Kells, around 800, off the coast of Ireland, the middle of nowhere. And there's this beautiful blue in the Book of Kells, ultramarine. Well, there's only one place in the world at that time that came from, and that was a mine deep in Afghanistan. So when people say the global economy is new, no. This ultramarine, this semi-precious rock, got from Afghanistan off to the coast of Ireland. It was traded. So, but today, of course, this global economy, it's much deeper. The chains are much stronger. And so, and we know that this trade is important. It doesn't guarantee higher living standards, but what it does do is it leads to greater innovation, more exchange of ideas, and it puts pressure on business to be more efficient, to come up with more creative ways to create their products and their services. And the history of globalization has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we're going through a period of 1 step back right now. But nonetheless, globalization is a powerful force over the next decade. The digital economy, I mean, this is quicksilver communications, artificial intelligence, big data, the mobile technology, and they're pushing deeper and deeper into our economy. I mean, it is kind of striking to think that the personal computer really started around 3 decades ago, and it wasn't the internet until 1995 when Netscape went public and sort of announced, here are the commercial possibilities of the internet. So this is coming deeper and deeper into our economy. And my favorite example for illustrating how important this digital economy is becoming is the autonomous driving vehicle. It's coming, and I can't wait. I could come out of my house, say, oh, I want to go to Duluth Convention Center, and then sit back and read. I mean, that wowould be really cool, right? So that's happening. And one of the reasons why globalization is going to continue is that globalization and the information technologies feed off of each other and they reinforce one another. The third is the aging of the population, and one of the student presentations mentioned was looking at the workforce and the older workforce. So the Census Bureau forecasts that those 65 and older by 2030 will be 21% of the population, about 1/5 of the population. And that's up from 15% in 2014. And older Americans are living longer on average, they're healthier on average, and they're better educated on average, and they're working longer. So the people who, 1995 to 2016, so share of men 65 and older who are in the labor force rose from 28% to 38%. Among women, it was 18% to 30%. And the even more striking number that reinforces the same message, the 55 to 64-year-old age cohort in 2016 created 26% of all new businesses in the country. So when you think about entrepreneurship, you may think of some Mark Zuckerberg or in the earlier era Bill Gates, but actually a majority, more and more businesses are being created by the 55 plus population. And then if you look at the 40 plus, you end up, it's a majority. And the last thing that I want to talk about, the last trend, which I think is a surprising trend, but has been gathering momentum, is this rise of an artisan, craft, creative business economy. I mean, you can think about the spread of the brew pubs, handcrafted outdoor gear, handmade shoes, pottery, the blacksmiths. And these kinds of businesses have always been around, but they're kind of quaint, right? They were often the sidelines. Somebody had a little bit of a passion, or they made a lot of money, and they could kind of indulge themselves. And but now these craft businesses, they've moved from society's tributaries into the mainstream. And the thing is that these creative industries are armed with modern technology. They use the internet. They use the mobile technologies to sell into bigger markets than their geographic location. And they partner with firms when it's convenient, bigger firms. And most importantly, and I think most importantly when we're thinking about economic development, is that these artisan businesses attract a skilled labor force. Or they attract a labor force that may not be that skilled, but wants to learn. And so it's what's probably the most important effect, economic effect of this trend. So these artisan businesses, these craft businesses, they're revitalizing neighborhoods, they boost a brand in the area, and they attract other businesses, including high-tech firms. And as one small business expert noted, so he said, artisans will craft not only their goods, but shape the economy with an effect far beyond their neighbors, even their nations. And labor economists more and more are writing about how this sort of craft businesses, these artisan businesses, are the new middle-class jobs of the future. And middle class in the true sense of the word, not that you're going to be wealthy, but that you're going to have a job that provides purpose and a paycheck, a job that gives you meaning and money, and a job that provides you opportunities for advancement, a job that provides you opportunities to be engaged, and a job that means you can pay your bills. And so there's a lot, this has, if you pull these strands together, this region, looking out this window, you can see the physical manifestation that this region has been long tied to the global economy. I mean, there's the port. And the history of this region is tied to the global economy. So globalization is nothing new. But the artisan economy, this is new. And this does feed off of globalization. It does feed off of the digital economy. And most importantly, it feeds off a multi-generational workforce. Now, there are no numbers that I'm aware of. I looked and I haven't been able to find them. So it's anecdotal. But in doing reporting on the creative economy, on creative businesses, one of the most striking trends is how many parents, boomers, are going into business with their Gen X and millennial children. And it makes a lot of sense. All the data that we have is that, the parents and the kids, they like each other. They really do. I was talking to this consultant, small business consultant, and we were having this conversation. And so we both loved our parents. Love my dad. And if my dad had walked into the room and said, hey, Chris, you want to go into business together? I would have run so fast. It would have been, no, this could not be. Now, if my kids came into the room and said, hey, Dad, you want to go into business together? I'd drop everything in a heartbeat. And I have talked to more and more people that share that sentiment. And one of my favorite examples is you look at Pew Research. And they looked at the 10 most popular songs, artists, with millennials and boomers. 1 and 2, Rolling Stones and the Beatles. They have good taste. So, I've held 2 of Minnesota Public Radio's conversations on the creative economy with local entrepreneurs here in Duluth. And they were in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, which was for a long time a troubled neighborhood. Now you're sort of seeing this rise of this artisan boom. And the entrepreneurs that I interviewed, they said that, look, they want their business located in Duluth. I did have to ask them, you do know that it's cold here, right? Okay. But they've said yes. Talented workforce, you can draw on a lot of universities. We just saw with the power, the effect of these universities, and costs low relative to the bigger city. But it spreads throughout this region. So I was looking at this really intriguing study done a little more than a decade ago in the northwest Wisconsin. It was the Ashland and Bayfield counties. And the study drew a picture of the creative community. And the typical person in this creative community had worked at her craft for art, craft or artists for about 10 years and supplemented her income with the art of the craft, had no paid employees. But their work in the aggregate, all together, enhanced the region as an attractive place and enhanced the region's brand that this is a place where innovative and creative people went. And so the point of this, one of the points of this study was, are these creative people an undervalued asset in our community? And what I think we're seeing today is the value of what was an undervalued asset is going up. And these businesses range, they're all over. Some are professional services where people leverage their skills that they developed over the years, to artists and food makers who become bakers. And most of these activities, most of them stay small, but not all of them. Some of them are going to become formidable competitors. I mean, I can't imagine that the Benson brothers, when they were skateboarding, and they had this really creative idea, but hey, we like skateboarding, so let's make some skateboarding parks, that they ever thought that they'd have a 60,000 square foot factory in Superior, looking out on Lake Superior on Connors Point, that is selling to over 50 countries around the world, Epicurean, and that they have 3 companies with national and international reputations. And the same thing is true, we were talking earlier about, I interviewed Aerostitch, and Mr. Goldfein, what he started in 1973, around the time that someone put up the sign, last person leaving Duluth, turn out the lights. It was up there, I gather, for 2 hours, did some research. And yet this company sells its product all over, everywhere. Turkey, Norway, US. Anybody who commutes by a motorcycle knows the company Aerostitch. So again, did it start out that it was going to be that big? So part of this is creating an environment, an atmosphere, where lots of spaghetti, lots of ideas go up against the wall. And lots of it is that people will create something that provides an income, is satisfactory, and it'll stay small, but some of them are going to become very big. And as I was mentioning, when we oftentimes talk about the creative economy, it's got this image of, it's got a, the person's wearing a hoodie and they got a beard and their partner's got fleece and lots of tattoos, and this is what the creative economy is all about. Well, a lot of the people in the creative economy have gray hair, and they've had a passion and they've had a skill and they have knowledge. They got a little bit of capital and they got a home. And all of a sudden, they're creating a business. And so I think this is part of, how do you turn a homebrew passion into a small business? And that brings me to one of the things that I think this area has, and there's, which is this network of colleges and universities. And one of the things I just want to highlight, because it was just announced, I believe yesterday or the day before, where University of Minnesota Duluth has launched this creative startup, Duluth Labs. And the driving idea here is to foster more entrepreneurship, and particularly to foster entrepreneurship for people who want to grow a business, start a business, grow a business, develop that business. But the thing that I want to highlight is the list of partners. And the list of partners is really intriguing. So it's Duluth LISC, the Family Freedom Center, Duluth American Indian Community Housing Organization, Fathers Rise Together, Minnesota Indian Business Alliance, and Integrated Resources, a staffing agency. And what the specific mandate here is inclusiveness, to reach out throughout the community to draw more and more people into this creative economy, into this entrepreneurial economy, into the creative businesses. And some of these businesses are going to end up selling globally. And the thing is, this isn't just a Duluth Superior story, right? You can go throughout this region that we're talking about, and you can see there are other initiatives, towns welcoming incubators, accelerators, co-sharing workspaces, other initiatives. So I'm intrigued by these initiatives like the Iron Range Makerspace, right? A makerspace, co-working space, an incubator in Hibbing, Minnesota. Or there's the Iron River Enterprise Center in Iron River, Wisconsin. Now it's small, but again, it's intriguing. Or the Grand Marais Arts Colony, been around for a long time, but it's also helped a lot of artists make a living and become professionals. And then spent some wonderful times up in Bayfield, and there's the Ashland and Bayfield County Inventors Entrepreneurs Organization. And it has a mission to help local businesses start up, or if they've already started up, how can you grow? And they have resources, and they have mentoring, and all kinds of advice. So taken all together, if you just look at these initiatives, I think you have a growing ecosystem, a creative economy ecosystem. And this ecosystem is going to only grow. It's going to grow because of globalization. It's going to grow because of the information technologies. And it's going to grow because this region has a history of that kind of activity. And so there's a reason for people to come here. Now, some areas are more developed than others. There's a lot more that needs to be done. I think there's, for economic development, more resources can go into the creative economy, but the opportunity is there, and the opportunity can be seized. And so I want to just end on this one note. So remember the students. The most important result I took away from the student survey is the main limiting factor to business is a lack of qualified workers. Now that survey is here. You can do that survey for Minnesota, you can do that survey for Wisconsin, you can do that survey for the nation. That survey just keeps coming out. And that makes me so happy. That is the best news that you can have in an economy. It's not good news, it's great news. Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, once defined a good economy as an economy where firms are looking for workers, not where workers are looking for jobs. And we are in an economy where firms are looking for workers. And the thing is, managements are now willing to spend a lot more on training. Management are now turning to their older workers, and instead of saying, of course you can't say it quite this way, but when are you going to retire? Are you thinking about retiring? They're sort of saying, what can I do to keep you? I need you. And I was interviewing, it's another part of town, closer to Twin Cities, but it was interesting. It was advanced manufacturing company, and they're machining, and they're doing a lot of investing with the community colleges to bring a younger generation in, but they got order flows, and they got a big order book. And so they need to keep their older workers. So they're investing in automation, not to eliminate their worker, but to keep their older workers around with their skill. And individuals with gaps in their resumes, individuals that 3 years ago, human resources departments would not look at, they're now hiring. So this is why that result is really important. And just one striking example is anecdotal, but during the summer I went from Twin Cities to Madison, visit with some friends, stopped in a fast food restaurant and noticed that everybody behind the cash register was 60 plus. So then I stopped at just a whole bunch. I didn't need the food. I just stopped at all these fast food restaurants on that trip. And everywhere I went, it was the exact same thing. And what this reminded me of was this study that was commissioned in Britain by McDonald's. And what it looked into an older workforce in the fast food restaurants. And what it found is that in a multi-generational workforce, with workers 60 and over, in a fast food restaurant, customer satisfaction is 20% higher than an age-segregated restaurant, fast food restaurant. Now the key was, it was multi-generational. And what it was is that the younger people liked the older workers. The older workers had a work ethic. And so net, the customer was happier. And so what I took away from that is what we're going to see is the rise of a multi-generational workforce. And that this, in all our research, all our studies, show that that is to the benefit of productivity of the company. And the thing about artisan work is that it's attractive work. It offers the possibility for a better work-life balance. I mean, craft work almost by definition blends purpose and a paycheck. And so, people in the craft industry, when you interview them, they always talk about how much fun they're having. It collapses that gap between work and leisure. And the thing about this region and what it has is a network of really good educational institutions, the technical colleges throughout the region, the community colleges, the full colleges down here. And then you also have partnerships with public-private partnerships in terms of educating skilled workers. So thanks to this sort of post-secondary education infrastructure built by some pretty wise predecessors, I think that this area has a real opportunity to take advantage of the rise of the creative economy, to attract a skilled workforce, to train a skilled workforce, and that the current workforce has the opportunity to upgrade their skills and to get better work. So when I look at globalization and the information technology, and there's a lot of gloom and doom right now surrounding it, I say for this region, this is the best news that you can have. The creative economy has roots here. It can have much deeper roots. It can provide entrepreneurship and good jobs for a surprising number of people. And then the people who don't participate in that creative economy, because of the labor shortages, they're going to get higher pay and better opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right, we have lots of questions. And I'd like to first open it up to live questions first. So we have a couple runners out there with mics. So would you please raise your hand if you have a question from the audience?
And brickbats are acceptable. So just in case anybody didn't hear it, it's about, okay, so how do you bring underserved communities, people, single parents, people who don't have much money into the mainstream economy, into our educational institutions, and into the businesses that we're talking about?
Right, and one other thing, I have made an assumption that the creative economy comes a little bit from one might have some additional blessings in one's life that they can then move into what might be called that creative economy. For those without those sorts of blessings, how do they move into that kind of situation where they can be part of the creative economy, or are they have a value stream for themselves?
All right, so how much time do we have?
No.
So, I mean, but look, you're asking that question, and it's extremely difficult, and there's lots of strands to the answer. But the fundamental answer right now is for anybody who is asking that question to be extremely impatient, because we have a tight labor market. And in a tight labor market, the willingness of business, of organizations, of communities to invest in people is unprecedented. When the labor market is weak, then all of a sudden you can't afford. You can't do all these kinds of things. And so first, my first real response is to say, look, everybody's looking for workers. And so for those organizations that bring workers into the workforce, accelerate your efforts, because take advantage of the time now. Business is willing to train. And that may be the most fundamental shift that has happened in our economy. When a decade ago, fall of the House of Lehman, you saw a big decline in the willingness to train. 5 years ago, businesses still weren't willing to train because there was a line of people out the door. Today, business is willing to train. And that is actually the single most important answer to your question, is the ability to get hired and the ability to be trained. And then as far as reaching out in the lower income resources, I would push back a little bit. Yes, some of it is people have some money, they may own their own home, for example, and that becomes their office. But it's really having a skill. And so I was talking to these, I was down in Pittsburgh, and I was talking to these older machinists, and they're 80 years old, and they're wonderful characters, and they're all mentoring young people to become machinists. But one of them had a side thing where out of Carnegie Mellon, there's all these people building these robots. But it doesn't make sense to, if you're building a robot, to have it machined in China or to have it machined in Germany. It's just too expensive. So an 80-year-old is doing a little bit of machining because that's what he knows how to do. And again, it was an opportunity. And so he's part of this creative economy. He doesn't have many resources. The only thing that he has is a skill. And that's the most important thing.
Over here.
My name is Obiagili Ekunwa from the University of Wisconsin Superior. So this summer, a student and I, a PME and I, we carried out a research on the retail industry of the city of Superior, given the fact that big box stores have left the city. What would you suggest to revitalize the retail sector of the city of Superior?
So one of the things about answer your question like that is you get to sort of make these grand statements, and I know that the mayor is here and he's actually dealing with questions like that. And so my sense is what you really want to be doing is reaching out to figure out ways to create an environment where someone has an idea, a small shop. Well, you know, if you notice, there's been the rise of the pop-ups. And lots of people are doing these pop-ups. And the reason why they do these pop-ups is it's a retail business. You have a retail idea. You got some kind of product, but you can't afford brick and mortar. That's just too expensive. So you do these pop-ups, and you turn these pop-ups into events. Maybe you go to a farmer's market, for example, or there's an event going on, a concert over in Superior. And it's a way of keeping your costs down, but actually having some customers, developing an email list. So what's a pop-up on Main Street? What's the equivalent of a pop-up on Main Street? And I think a lot of it is about focusing your development resources on what are essentially low-income businesses. And what's hard about those low-income businesses, they don't pay much in taxes. The advantage if you get a retail chain to come in is that they're going to pay more in taxes. But your local business actually cares about the local community. And hopefully, they'll grow. So, you know, there's always this tension between your tax money, your tax revenue, your tax growth. But I really do think that if you're creating an environment where you take this pop-up culture and then you're offering them the co-sharing workspaces, you're offering them the incubators, you're offering them, you know, some lower cost options in terms of renting space, that's the way that I would approach it.
Yeah, button back there. Okay, in the back.
Yeah, good morning. I'm just kind of curious. One thing I was thinking about, we have an election coming up, and we have elected officials in the room, and just kind of curious, like, would you have any recommendations on, say, maybe policies a community could be adopting that would, you know, foster the creative enterprises you were talking about in your speech?
You know, I think, you know, standing on my soapbox, the main thing is just what I already said is, this is an opportunity with this tight labor market to have a more inclusive economy. And, you know, you can do that all kinds of ways, but that opportunity is there. I think the other thing that a lot of regions are learning is if you have this sort of creative entrepreneurship and you have this entrepreneurial energy, then it's really getting back to some of the fundamentals of what government does. Good infrastructure, good education, safe streets, but inclusiveness. And bringing more and more people. That's why I really like what the University of Minnesota Duluth with this initiative is doing, is it's reaching out into communities that oftentimes aren't included openly into the co-sharing workspace, into the incubator. And that, to me, that's where government can make a huge difference. So again, we're living in an era where almost, I would argue, you want to go back to the basics. You want to go back to fundamentals. In journalism, we're seeing that. In this environment, go back to the basics of journalism. That's how we do our best journalism. With government, it's go back to the basics of government, what government can do well. And one of the things that government can do well is create networks that can bring the public and private sector together to have a more inclusive economy. And then see what sticks and who starts a business. And I think you're going to be surprised who starts a business.
John Kratz, UMD. Chris, you've written extensively on our broken retirement system. Many people don't have defined benefit retirement. Average household savings for retirement is pretty miserable. How does this tie into your talk today with the artisan economy?
So it really ties in because one of the responses is this, is people are going to be working longer. Now this is in an environment where we're living longer, we're healthier on average, we're better educated on average, and we're going to be working longer. Now, working longer doesn't mean that the place that you've been with, that you're still going to be around the same colleagues, you want to say goodbye to them forever. I mean, okay, it's time to go. And you don't want to be told again, work, you know, I'm going to pay you 40 hours, but we want you to work 50 hours. So a lot of times, it's this pursuit of meaning and money. And it's to find something that's bringing in an income, but at the same time, you know, you want to be doing. I mean, one of the things as you get older is you do realize time is shorter. But if you think about it, there's a rule of thumb in the personal finance industry. How much money can I withdraw from my retirement savings? And typically they'll say 4%. So, if you're bringing in $20,000 a year, that's the equivalent of what? A 4% withdrawal on a $250,000 portfolio, right? So, okay, it makes a big difference. So maybe I don't have that much in savings, but what people oftentimes have, 6% of the population, 65 and plus, own their own home. So they do have some assets. But what they mostly have is knowledge, skill, experience. And I think what this creative economy offers is the prospect of employment that's fun, that's part-time. And it's not going to pay a huge salary, but enjoy what you're doing.
Yes. Over there.
My name is Keshav Srinivasan. I'm a student at UMD, and considering that we live in essentially the internet age where it's much easier to get any kind of information, would you say that there's like a heightened sense of accountability for like any kind of business in this regard? So it's like just to make sure that nothing bad essentially happens.
I think there is something to that. Part of it depends on what the business is saying. So if you're a business and you're promoting yourself as green, sustainable, and you make some promises, people are going to check you out. And they're going to go on and they're going to see what's really happening. And is this greenwash or is this real? I'm not talking about an ideal world, because a lot of times being green is a progression. It's a progress. You're trying to get better every single year. And when you talk to businesses that it's a core of what they're doing, and more of these creative economy businesses, it is about being sustainable, they're not there. And they'll tell you that they're not there. But every year they try and get a little bit better. But I do think that there is a greater awareness because of the internet, but there's also the other side of it, which is there's that good side of it where you do the research and you can check out what someone's doing and they can sell to the global economy. I always get a little bit worried. There seems to be a lot of shaming and beating up on people that can happen, which is more the negative side of it. But I would be positive in, if you have a small business and you have a belief about what this business is going to be doing, and you really believe it, put it out there and then live the walk. And the community will support you if you do that.
Janet?
Thank you. Senator Janet Bewley from Wisconsin. What would you predict is going to be the best description of healthcare as it relates to the requirement that right now that it's the employer's burden? Do you expect or do you see a trend away from that, and is that good or bad?
So if you talk to any healthcare economist that's not at an ideological think tank, they will all agree that the employer-sponsored health insurance system is deeply flawed. And the simple reason is, and we all know this, why is it when you lose your job, your family loses their health care? So this is, and that is not a conservative statement, that is not a liberal statement, that is just an analytical statement from the data that we know. Part of what the US is struggling with is we have an economy where people are mobile, people lose their jobs, people have multiple careers, and how do you establish a healthcare system that allows them to move seamlessly from job to job, that your health care is portable? And so that's the real debate that's going on. So what the Affordable Care Act tried to do was knit together an old system. It kept the employer sponsored as the core, but tried to create a viable individual market and expanded Medicaid. And in a sense, that's a fairly traditional, fairly conservative approach. Then you have Medicare for All that is going on in that discussion. And a lot of that depends on what does that really mean. That can mean different things to different people, and people can have different assumptions in there. But to me, the key to keep in mind is that you want your population, your working population, to be mobile. You want them to go where the jobs are. And you want the employer to be able to lay off people and hire people at will. And in that economy, where you have the upheavals of information technology and the upheavals of international trade, which, by the way, are good. People shouldn't be losing their health care along the way. So how you knit that system together is the struggle, but the key point is you need to knit that system together if you want to have a mobile, educated, skilled workforce and the employer still have the ability to hire and fire at will.
So you're not waiting for the shoe to drop.
I think that's where we're going. I mean, but my solution may not be somebody else's solution, but that is the key. What you cannot do is go back to a world of pre-existing conditions, and you cannot go back to a world where someone loses their job and their family loses their health care. How you go forward is the real discussion.
Hello. I have a
Question? Yes.
Now, Chris, it sounds as though you are the view that globalization is good.
Yes.
There's a lot of history of it. Does it make sense to try to defeat it or impact it, such as the use of tariffs?
So I'm not a big fan of tariffs. I think the problem with tariffs is it opens the world up to a form of political corruption. Because who gets the tariff, who doesn't get the tariff, who gets the exemption, who doesn't get the exemption. And the long-term effect of tariffs, and what we're seeing, tariffs don't lead to a recession. They don't. Now, maybe if we get to a certain level, they might. But what tariffs do is they misallocate capital and they misallocate resources. So the issue is, what is it you're trying to solve here? There are a lot of benefits to globalization. And there's this expression that economists use. They say net. Most people benefit from globalization, but of course, and I hate this word, but of course there are some losers, and let's put losers in quotes. The losers, all that means is the people on the wrong side of the trade. That's the issue. So what are the resources? What are the resources in terms of training? What is the resource in terms of education? What is the resources in terms of helping get a new job? So that's what I would be focusing on, is the labor force and not on tariffs, which distorts trade and leads to a certain kind of corruption over a long period of time and misallocates capital. And fundamentally, you have a weaker economy with tariffs than without tariffs.
Anybody else in the audience? Oh, over there.
I'll follow up on that question, and I agree. I don't like tariffs, free market economy. That's the way I think the world should go. But how do you combat a country like China, the second largest economy, going to be the biggest economy soon, when they have tariffs on our products going into there, but we don't tariff their products coming here? How do you combat that?
Right. So, I mean, so there's actually absolutely no dispute, I think that's fair to say, that China's been a bad actor over the last couple of years, at least, in the global trading system. So you would have that in the nation's capital, most businesses, you can go to Europe, you can go out everywhere in the world, people will agree with that. So then the question is, how do you combat that? And my argument would be, you combat that through negotiations with your partners and you present a united front. So you got Europe on our side, you got Latin America on our side, you got the US on our side, and you really negotiate, and you go through the World Trade Organization, and you have a negotiated position. Right now we're in a world where what is the end game? What is the goal? What are we negotiating for? You could come back and say that in the current administration, they just actually like tariffs. That may be the strategy, that they just simply do like tariffs, and they like what tariffs do, and they like there's no real end game to the whole strategy. So the debate has really been not that the United States should not be having really tough negotiations with China. The question has been, what's the strategy? And the question has been why we didn't negotiate to bring Europe and the United States and the rest of the world as a united front in negotiations with China. And we had that opportunity because the agreement was across the world that China was a bad actor. And part of the TPP negotiation, the trade agreement of the 11 nations, did not include China. Part of TPP really was part of that strategy. And we dropped that negotiation. So I think, yes, you're absolutely right. The question is, how do you approach it? And I think tariffs is the wrong way to go.
Anyone else in the audience? Yes, Monica.
Hi, Monica Haynes from UMD. We have a lot of economic development agencies in the room, and I know one question for a region is always, what's a better strategy? Incentivizing large companies from trying to bring companies from outside the area to develop here versus trying to grow existing businesses, or, of course, always some combination of the two. And do you have any suggestions for those agencies that are here in the room?
So, I think for the agencies in the room, and probably, they've well thought this 10 times past what I have, but I do think it's easy to make fun, and sometimes people do, about the rise of the incubators, the co-sharing workspaces, the creative zone. But I actually think that's the right thing to do, because what you're doing is you're providing a platform, a format, and tying it into your local colleges and universities, your other nonprofits. Some of it may be social enterprise. So I think that this emphasis on entrepreneurship is a real thing, and it's a real opportunity, but it's also as moving into recognizing that we have a lot of stereotypes when we think about entrepreneurship. We typically think it's a young person. And it turns out it's actually usually an older person, or it's a multi-generational startup. So it's about reaching out in your community, creating an entrepreneurial environment, providing those resources. And one of the things that really struck me was there was a recent survey that came out, a global survey, and pretty legitimate. And if you want to start a business, the number one place in the world in terms of getting your business up and running is that it takes one day in New Zealand, and all your licenses, all your forms, everything is done. The US is down about 65th in the world. So when people want to talk about deregulation and want to talk about how can you help small business, it strikes me that that's the area where there can be a lot of progress. You can move away from a lot of the ideological divides that we have, and how do you make it really easy and really fast to start a small business?
Yes. Want to bring the mic over? Oh, I'm sorry.
Richard Stewart, University of Wisconsin Superior.
Former captain.
Yeah. Question for you. One of the major issues in attracting workers, even to an area like this, is affordable housing.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations, or better yet, models that you've studied where affordable housing has been created?
The affordable housing issue is tough. And the only thing that I think that there are real limits to where you say to a developer, you can build, but we're going to leave aside 10 to 20% is going to be affordable housing. You're always going to run out. In the end, you have to have greater supply. And so there's the YesB movement and the NIMBY movement. So the YesB movement is yes in my backyard, NIMBY movement, no in my backyard. And what I take from the YesB movement is I think they're right about you have to increase supply. You just do. And a lot of times, depending on the community, that's going to mean more fourplexes or more sixplexes, whatever. At the same time, they don't have to be really ugly, and they don't have to destroy the neighborhood. And so there seems to me there is room for negotiation there. But at the core, it's going to be increasing the supply. And then you can negotiate around that. But I think without increasing supply, it's a futile quest.
Malako Abagaz, UMD. I'm asking this question because a person asked me, and as an economist, I give you my answer. But I want to hear from you. There is a big tax cut, and the assumption was the deficit would solve by itself through economic growth. Is there a way that will work out, or how is it going to impact the deficit?
So with the big tax cut, the big tax cut was sold, if you look at the core with the corporate tax cut, is that it was going to lead to an investment boom. And if you had an investment boom, which leads to higher productivity, which therefore means you can grow faster without generating inflation, you still end up with an enormous deficit. But you could look at the business investment and saying, this is a good thing. The disappointment with the tax cut is you ended up with the huge deficit. You have not ended up with the business investment boom. The business investment is going okay. It's at a decent level, but there has been no boom. And if you look at the recent GDP report, it's all consumer spending is largely driving the economy, and business investment was actually disappointing. So when making claims about this, if you cut, tax cuts do not pay for themselves. We know that. But the second order is also to look at what happens to business investment. That's the real key, and that has been disappointing so far.
One more question.
The last one.
Anybody from the audience? All right.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'd like to thank all of our economic development associations that set up out in the mezzanine prior to coming in. I hope you got to experience a little bit of what they offer. And they're all working very hard in this region collectively to bring more entrepreneurship, creativity, business investment to our area. So if you get an opportunity to visit with them, please do so. And I thank them then again for coming. As you'll note in your overview here, our spring REIF event is April 2nd, and our speaker is Jennifer Ford Reedy, the president of the Bush Foundation. So we should have a very exciting presenter at that point. Again, our effort to continue to bring in nationally known people that you can talk with and learn from. So look forward to that. And also, I'd like to again thank the committee that puts together the REIF Breakfast, a pretty robust group of people from the University of Wisconsin-Superior, UMD, and St. Scholastica, along with some bank officials and other economic development folks in the market. It's a big effort, and we look forward to bringing you a quality program, and we hope you'll make sure to attend, and please provide feedback to us. If we had your email address, and we have most of them, we have already sent you the link to give us some feedback on this program. And if you have suggestions for future programs, we're always planning at least almost now a year in advance for future programs. So with that, I wish you a happy Halloween. Thank you very much for coming, and see you next time.